Hello there. Welcome to the Immigrant Perspective, where we look at the many aspects of the fall of the American Empire through the eyes of an immigrant. Today's topic, we want to explore the greatest matriarchy of all time. There are quite some um okay, I'm looking for the right way to put this because one thing we covered yesterday was that in this country you no longer can tell the truth. So if you're listening, you need to listen to what I am saying in order to understand what I'm trying to say. Because I have to kind of say certain things in certain ways. If you've been paying attention to the media or, what is called the red pill movement, the whole notion of what the traditional idea, gender roles, basically, the traditional gender roles, you would have heard a lot of arguments about there has never been a matriarchy that has stood the test of time. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think the United States, as it's its nature from the beginning of time, it's trying to change history. It's trying to alter reality. I think the United States is trying to get to the point where you can think of it one day and say, hey, look at America. It was the greatest nation that ever existed, and it's a matriarchy. I know that sounds preposterous, but so much has been tweaked in this present reality that at this point it's hard to doubt almost anything we are confronted with. But let's look at it this way. If we do believe that the whole idea of human beings would be the expression of energy, right? The male and the female. And the strong points for feminine energy would be things like emotions. The strong points for masculine energy would be will. Look at the world around you. You find that the societies, or rather, you find that societies are divided, are very binary to a great degree, if you get what I'm saying there. There are societies that are very male dominated with regards to the energy they put out there, right? And then when you come to Western civilization, the nations that you would consider the West, even though geographically they may not necessarily all belong to the West. An example of that would be Australia, is wherever Australia is, New Zealand. But we still consider these nations traditionally as part of the West because of what used to be their value system, which I would argue no longer exists. But for now, they're still uniform because they all decided at the same time to change their value system, right? Now, if you look at those nations, you find that the energies that they're pushing out are very feminine energies. Like these nations care more about how you feel, care more about, aesthetics, the way things look, as opposed to the way things are. While you're having other nations like the Chinese and the Russians who were more into things that are. I mean, we can criticize whatever you want to criticize, but if you've been listening to, or let me not say if you have been listening, let's rephrase. If you have ever listened to Russian president's speech in the time of this war, you realize how he puts out a vision for his country that seemed very traditional, right? Very old school, he talks about the idea of what gender should be in his country, the idea of religion, he mentioned it, hinted it, as for the forgiveness of a God, right? The point here is, if this be true, if you go back in history and realize you cannot find any matriarchy that has stood the test of time, And if you ever come across anyone that existed, you realize then that it was overrun by the men in the society. This father goes on to elaborate on my point on the title of this podcast, which is The Fall of the American Empire. It's basically talking about the fall of the West. Looking at everything critically, you find that the United States slowly but certainly over the past couple of decades, the country has perfected the replacement of order in her institutions with the concept of feelings. That is why today you would take the health industry. No doctor calls a patient a female anymore. That just does not exist. There are now called birthing persons. Why? Because we have to take into consideration the feelings of people. A certain Colonel Douglas McGregor, I think, had talked about the fact that even the military is getting woke. And there is evidence for that. I think the United States military now considers the need for females or biological females out on the front lines, right? These are all indications that there is a social experiment going on in this country to rewrite the rules. And this will not be far-fetched. If you really sit down to pay attention, you must have heard that every day what our children are getting indoctrinated in the colleges, from the media, whatever you turn to, a book, a movie, the notion or the message has been the same. For thousands of years, men oppressed women. It's been a patriarchy, and we need to overthrow that patriarchy. But what they have failed to realize is that historical evidence shows that for a nation to stand, you would need the men, because the men naturally, for over thousands of generations, have been the ones who have fought the wars. Now, I'm not here to say women should not fight our wars. I'm just saying that there is no historical evidence that large groups of women have succeeded at being warriors to dominate men. Forget all that Wakanda crap you saw. I'm sorry, but we're talking about real stuff right now. Sorry about that. And I think it's imperative to look at it from that angle, right? To pay attention and to ask yourself, if this be the social experiment going on by the intellectuals in our society, what do you foresee as the possible end? You know, it is easy. I'm okay with having an experiment in a laboratory, right? You could try something out, and if there's an explosion, we just shout, ouch, ooh, and we have to wipe up, maybe take over our coveralls and all that stuff. That's cool. That's what laboratories are for, right? But when you now begin to experiment with people's livelihoods and futures, because if anything was to happen, which you can see will happen, because the more feminine our society gets, and let me just, before I continue on that thought, let me just state this here. I am not in any way disagreeing with female or feminine energy. Not at all. I would argue that we need women to be women, and we need men to be men. I do strongly believe that men are good at certain things and women are good at certain things. And I think if you follow the principle of meritocracy, where you give to the person, you give a task to someone who's pretty good at it, you are more likely to get better outcomes, right? So I am only here trying to say that from the look of things, after having lived here for a year, and if you missed out on a previous episode where I talked about the fact that yes, I'm an immigrant in America, and that I am experiencing what you may call buyer's remorse, because the America I believe I was moving to is not the America that I live in. The America I expected was, the, how do you put it? The castle on the hill. But it looks like there's an earthquake up on the hill, right? And so all I'm trying to say is that when you pay attention to these things, coming from the perspective of someone who has lived somewhere else before, that it seems we are engaging in a social experiment that is not necessarily healthy for future outcomes. Let's put it like that. The whole notion, the whole push to have every institution in America refuse to look at real data that has existed for thousands of years, whether recorded in history or just being played out. An example would be the concept of marriage. Societies before they ever met each other figured out differently that it made sense for men and women to stay together. If they're creating offsprings, it was better for the man to go out and struggle and for the woman to raise the offspring and nurture the offspring, right? It just kind of worked better for thousands of years, right? But now in America, when you look at what's going on from a critical perspective, you find that the society that's more or less saying there is no need for that. I mean, there's data that shows that over 50% of marriages end in a divorce. There's data that shows that over 80% of children in black neighborhoods are born without fathers. There's data that shows that there are now certain jurisdictions in this country that are changing laws, rewriting laws, and saying you can have birth certificates of children and not mention the name of your fathers. This is an experiment that doesn't look like it's going to end well. This is an experiment that intellectuals are probably trying to rewrite history, but sadly may be met with the very essence of that history, with the very outcome that the opposition has argued in favor of all along. That no matriarchy has ever stood the test of time. And it's looking very much like America may have to find that out the hard way. Because every institution of this country is replacing order with feelings. Is replacing laws with care. Is replacing logic with emotions. Look around you. Look at the laws that are being passed in Congress. Look at the way your politicians are campaigning. Look at how what new ideas are coming out with regards to education, with regards to parenting, with regards to even your health. And you will find then that the United States is not on the brink of collapse. We are living through the collapse. I will want to end this here. Thank you so much for hanging with me for this episode. I do hope you gain some value, and I hope you can like and subscribe. And tell me what you think in the comments. I'll be happy to, write back and hear your views. And if you think we are wrong here, please kindly share. Until next time, peace.